We are so glad that you guys drove here today to join us. Katie and I were driving up here today and we were like, I cannot believe, like, more people have come to this conference than have come see my bands. So no, we're super fortunate to have you join us.
Sorry, can you guys pass any sticky notes down the aisle? And if you come up with more, keep passing them. Sorry, Josh.
No, you're fine.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
So a lot of you may know that Utah's a large state geographically. Not the largest by any means, but if you wanted to connect with everybody in the state at one time, it would be fairly difficult. Thanks to the pandemic, we are now able to travel from Logan to Vernal to Blanding all in one day, which I think is fantastic, and not have to leave the comfort of our sweatpants. How many of you still get to work from home? High five. How many of you never got to work from home? Robin! Oh my gosh, so many of you.
2 weeks and I hated it. Because there was just too many things at the office that I needed.
Yeah. Well, and I got a little sample of what retirement's gonna be like, so looking forward to it. So a little bit of story time. In 2015, House Bill 68. This all came from the mind of David Saleh, so let's all channel David Saleh right now, who is working for the Future of Privacy Forum in Washington, D.C., because he's so brilliant. But House Bill 68 required USB to appoint a chief privacy officer and to create funding proposal for future privacy laws. That privacy officer, Whitney, was the first one. Then House Bill 358 took USB's funding and created the Student Data Protection Act, which was a newer law. The CPO, Whitney, was able to get legislature to provide more funding. So basically what I'm trying to point out is that, and you guys may not be aware of this, but Utah is very unique in the fact that we even have our office at a state level. So a lot of you deal with like metadata dictionary and all of that stuff. If we were in another state, all that would be law, but there wouldn't be a state agency helping you usher. Some of that is done by like nonprofit organizations. Like in California, they have a nonprofit that's doing it. Their state agency doesn't handle it. So we're fortunate that we have a state section within the state agency, even though there's not a lot of funding. But she was able to get funding to have some additional FTEs, which brought on some of the staff. There was that initial compliance review, and what they learned, which I'm sure is not a shock to a lot of us, is that privacy is hard. It's very hard to and Katie and I talk about this all the time, what privacy means to me is different for Robin. You know, it's different for Drew, it's different for everybody. So it's very convoluted, it's hard to put your finger on, and it's hard to teach it. You know, and so that's what they started learning. And so they went around the state and they figured, oh my gosh, we got to 20 plus different agencies. We are doing so much good work. But they found out that going to 20 agencies over the course of the whole state really equates to a very small percentage of educators. So based on that information, they requested changes to state law, Senate Bill 207, which you can hyperlink and click on all these should you want to. And then it was time for a reckoning. They were creating content for content's sake, but the idea was that privacy should be hard in order for you to understand it. You can't let it just be easy. You have to go into your metadata dictionary and you have to do every single thing. And then we created the Relationship course for teachers. Then in 2018, trying to get on top of app vetting, and that's when they were in the early stages of coming up with the partnership with SDPC. So some of you have been around that long. That's kind of the where we got to. I was hired in 2019 as the records manager. Katie, I believe you started in the midst of pandemic. We have Whitney and David Soleil on the team, and now I'm going to let you know where we exist within the structure of USBE. So here is us, Superintendent Dixon up here. We're under the policy section. Currently there are 2.5 of us. We have a budget of maybe 3 to 5, but we have another person on our team, Melissa, who is due to give birth any moment now, so she is not joining us on our little traveling circus across the state this week. But as you can see, student data privacy lit is under this policy, law, and professional practices section at USBE. And part of it too is that there's a data manager and ISO at each district or charter. Raise your hand if you are the data manager. This is our team. Director of Privacy. That was David. That is a vacant position. That does not mean it's the Wild West. We've got a very good handle. But this is our team. Katie is the Student Data Privacy Auditor, so she's the one that takes a look at all of your compliance surveys. I am Student Data Privacy Trainer, and Melissa is working on all sorts of data privacy governance stuff within our agency and out externally. Hopefully you all get to meet Melissa soon. So this is me, and when I first started, Whitney and David would always joke that when I was little, I wanted to grow up and go into privacy. I did not. I got a bachelor's degree in adolescent development. I was super into autism at the time. Autism wasn't as, I guess it was maybe as prevalent, but it wasn't as talked about, it wasn't as nurtured, it wasn't as seen as it is now. I worked in an after-school program in Liberty Park for 20 years at the best office in the state. I got to have a little developmental psychology lab where I got to test things on kids, and there are no IRBs that slap me down. And then I got into instructional design and educational technology because one day my son was 3 at the time, and he put a VR headset on, and he was doing like a solar system tour, and this 3-year-old freaked out. She was like, "Oh, Jupiter is big." And it blew my mind, just that little, the kids will, whenever I saw Jupiter, it was in a textbook, this big, with the thing, and then there's the little storm. This guy's able to and I'm sure all of your students know, and this was 5 years ago, the ability to kind of experience the world in the way that they were. I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to create content for that kind of stuff. So I work a lot with SDPC, with all of these different products, which I think it's great for me personally and professionally. I work a lot with app vetting, records management, and content creation. I have 2 children who are members of Gen Z, which means they can negotiate an iPad or all sorts of things way better than I ever could. And they are members of the most educated generation on the planet. Well, until the next generation comes along, of course. And I'm a rock musician. So, I Googled that this presentation is one that I presented in Nashville last April to a national audience because, like I said, Utah is very unique. They steal from around the country our stuff. And so it was a point of that conference, Rick Daysford is like, can you tell them what kind of stuff you guys have? And so we did. And the people in Tennessee at the time didn't know this, and neither did I, but I Googled which state has the most children, and of course, go to sleep, phone. Just because I said Google doesn't mean you did that. Utah has the highest rate of childbirth, 14.9 per 1,000. We have the most children. And as you can see here, 83% are located in this area. How many of you are located outside of those red circles? 1, 2, Robin, yeah, a little bit. And as we continue tomorrow when we're in Springville and the next day when we're in St. George, those numbers will be kind of the same. but this kind of makes us think about how we want to approach you, our users at agencies. This has got a lot of numbers and stuff on it, but what I will show you is 21 districts are in small or tiny rural areas and account for 6.2% of the students. What?
Official terms, tiny, rural, and small.
So this is how we kind of try to like look at districts based on how many students they have, because really in a lot of the things that we do, the size and scale of your agency dictates how you can implement a lot of this stuff. 9 districts have 64% of all of the students. That's crazy to me. But what it does is it really informs how we create content, how we distribute content, and how we do things like what we're doing this week is trying to come and personally work with you folks. So in the privacy world, we work with laws, funding, and oversight. So two state privacy laws. One is like PPRA, but a little stricter. And the other one is largely about contracts with vendors, data governance, data breaches response. We know that is with like metadata dictionary and those kinds of things. Funding, we have funding for 3 to 4 to 5 people to be employed at the state level. It pays for this SDPC, and you guys don't receive any funding from us for any of this. Sorry.
We're aware of that.
We're working on it. We gotta figure something out. And you guys are required to do certain things, but there's no stick. Like if you don't, and maybe what the stick is happening in the room next door. It's like a data breach or something really bad that will happen, right? But it's really important for us to know you by name and to have that connection. I think it's important for you to know who your records liaison is at State Archives, because they're a huge asset to us. But this is our approach. Trainings, technical support, please ask us questions. They turn and feed the trainings. There's like this feedback loop that happens here. Because what happens if you post a picture of a kid that goes to a high school that's not yours? That's not a question that we would have ever thought of until about half an hour ago. Support for SDPC, which I'm sure you guys love SDPC. Managed data governance at the state office, that's a lot of the stuff that Melissa is working on. Work with the school board. So Katie gets to do a lot of school board stuff on the first Thursday and Friday of the month. If any of you listen to school board meetings, I'm sure you're just as enthralled. Investigating the complaints. We've actually, since David left, I think it's been fortunate for us to be put in the position to hear about some things that happen. I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, we got a call from a charter. None of you, of course. You're all amazing. But what they had some issues with the media and a homecoming dance. And in response to the homecoming dance situation, a student took it upon themselves to start their own side party, homecoming party. And in doing so, this student got onto their email and typed, and I don't know if it was intentional, it was probably not, but was able to send an invite to everybody that had the domain at blank blank district.edu or whatever, and invited all of the students, all of the parents, and all of the faculty to this. Now that sounds funny and it's silly, and it is. However, in doing so, the way that the school had set up the names for the kids, it was their name and their student number at blank 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 school. So not only was that a touchy practice in the beginning, but now every single kid's name and student number is available to every single kid and parent and whatnot. So little tiny thing that we wouldn't have been super cognizant of, but we're learning and learning and learning and learning. Creating training materials and model documents, that's what we're covering today. Annual compliance review, which is no longer October 1st, November 1st-ish to the 15th. We're ishing it now. An evaluation, creation, feedback loop of all of this stuff. So it's very helpful for you to give us questions and for you to give us content so that we can then spin it around and create stuff for other folks. One of the things that I would like to do is to create a quick little one-sheeter, like a tutorial on what Katie was just talking about with social media. You know, something that's very easy to digest and very easy to distribute so that your teachers understand. So we have resources for educators. This is Agent FERPA. Part of my instructional design is I use this program called Beyond. I make tons of cartoons. It's so fun. What we have here is this resources for educators. In it, we have these different things. If you're following along, all of these are clickable so that you can check these out as well. Agent FERPA does all sorts of stuff. We have this YouTube. So this is the educators course, and I believe we've updated it in the last little bit to include some of our newer stuff, but the things that it does talk about are all listed right here. FERPA introduction, parent rights, FERPA and technology, websites and apps. So this is part of the educators course, but it's also important if you, at the beginning of the school year, in the middle of the school year, whenever you have a teacher development day and you need some sort of content to pull from, to be like, here's this. We have a whole library of things in regards to this very kind of nuanced FERPA. David is amazing at explaining it. The videos are great. And that's where most people in the state know David from, is from these videos. The teacher relationship course has had over 8,000 participants in the last year. So they all should be cognizant of these things. Every 5 years they have to take the course. Is that correct, Katie? Every 5 years?
Yeah, it's part of renewing the
License renewal. So they're cognizant of these things, but things are ever changing and being updated as well. This was something that we created a year ago, I think we released this. It's a 6-part series called Security for Teachers. Part 1 is what is security. None of these, I think one of them is longer than 5 minutes. The rest of them are all shorter than 5 minutes. But it is essentially, I'd love to show one to you, but because I wrote all the music. But it's actually aligns with the CIS 17 controls. So it's all very like, do this, do this, do this. I mean, I'm half tempted to see if somebody left the password on the monitor up here to the, I don't know how many of you have teachers or somebody that leave passwords on their monitors, but little things like that. And like he says right here, covers CIS 17 controls. We'll be adding new guidance to the playlist soon. Maybe we'll have to have the voice of Agent FERPA come back for an epilogue. There's Katie. We do a lot of resources for administrators as well. What to do, this one was a video that we did right at the beginning of the pandemic in regards to virtual classes and what kinds of things you should be doing, best practices. I mean, and of course that was at the beginning of the pandemic, but some things have maybe come up more. I know in our agency we had to send out a reminder for, and how many of you are still doing stuff virtually? Maybe virtual classes, virtual conferences, virtual, so very few. But one of the things that came up was like internally at USBE, people would have like a spreadsheet open and be going through and talking about something, but they would have PII and stuff on that. But it's, you know, between teachers and whatnot, and so, but there was still some sticky, icky, doesn't make you feel super good. Our admin resources and annual compliance check identifies areas for LEAs to improve, which has led to increased compliance with privacy law. What I'm seeing and conversations that I've had over the last month or so, I feel like this year we will be exponentially further in compliance than we've been in years past, just because I think that it's become something that, I mean, look at today, like you guys are here. And I think that that's important. And I think that what Katie and I also talk about too is that, like, we want privacy to be not this kind of weird, unobtainable concept, but that it's something that you can kind of grasp in the sense of, are we doing things for the benefit of kids, and are we reducing the harm that could potentially be caused? And I think actually, don't do anything well that you don't want to do again. But Drew, in an email last week, sent to us a thing. He was like, or maybe we were talking, he was like, normally I would just kind of like push it through and I wouldn't give it a second thought, but now like I have this privacy lens that you guys have cursed me with, and I have to kind of like have everything go through this privacy lens. And I think that that's really what we're hoping for, is that you do pay attention to those kinds of things. So things that we do provide are like the spring and fall training. So next spring in April, we'll do something similar as well. I mean, PTAC, this is the first time in 3 years that they've joined us, so it's a great resource that they are as well, as you can see here, working with PTAC. We like to keep you informed of legislative updates. So when the legislature gets together in January and they start formulating ways to make our lives more complicated, we'll keep you informed as to some of the things that they're trying to do and how that would be implemented, or how that could be implicated, and how that can, make your lives a little bit more difficult. Tabletop exercises, which I think we're going to try to do when I'm done yelling at you. Privacy and play, which are things where we take your scenarios and we try to like really invigorate some conversation. Some things that we talk about are like the different roles in the school and what kind of access should they have to certain pieces of data. Like, should the superintendent have access to everything? Maybe. I don't know. It depends on the size of your school and what kinds of things. And one of the things that Katie has been talking about a lot, and I'm sure that some of you would like to be, I mean, this could be another topic that we could go on forever, but we presented it, what was that, last week or 2 weeks ago at St. Con, about offboarding staff. And when someone leaves your agency, how do you effectively cut them out of the information situation and allow your stuff to continue to function? And local group involvement, we work with TCC. How many of you, I know Robert is, work with TCC, the Technology Coordinator Council? A few of you. If you're not familiar with what TCC is, do either of you have elevator speech that you... Do you find value in meeting with other folks at these TCC spaces? Very much so. Very much so. So it's everybody that's doing what you do across the state that gets together. It's a great group that gets together twice a year. Yeah. And I know, and you'll have to correct me, is Bryce Canyon every other year? So next year, there will be a retreat in Bryce Canyon for this group as well. And it's nice and chilly, but they've got the barn and they've got all the soda you need. USET is something that we participate in. We work a lot with UETN. I host monthly SDPC webinars. We send out newsletters. And we try to, because we like to travel, go to state and national conferences. Okay, how many of you are or know who the appointed records officer, or who here is the appointed records officer at their agency? So a few of you get emails from me that are like, update your appointed records officer certification. What we've done, this is Avalon. She was up until about 6 months ago your educational liaison. She is the avatar for all things records, because I'm not going to go in and change all of it right now. But these are things that we've created for that. Let me see if okay. So Utah, and this is something that Whitney will echo, because not only is she over all of the education agencies in the state now, but she's over most of the state agencies as far as, city, justice, utilities, those different kinds of things. And we are the leading sector in state government to have most of the folks at our schools approved and compliant with their records officer certification. I don't know how much much I'm gonna dive into this, I'll have to look, but this was something that was created 2 years ago, and of course, if you're following along, you can click on it. It's 51 pages. If anybody here has ever gone to the state's archive website to try to find, okay, I have this record, how long do I keep it for? That is the hardest thing you'll ever do, is to try to go into that website and try to align this record with this thing. So what we did was I went through all, I can't even remember how many thousand now, records, and consolidated them down so that everything that's in this document is education specific. So section 1 is all the administrative records. So that's like your board records, publications that you may have, all sorts of different things. Section 2 is all of the assets, your books, your buses, your balls, all the different things that you have. Section 3 is all of your financial records. Those are all records. I mean, typically when we think about educational records, we think about the ones dealing with students. But in 51 pages of this, there's probably a page and a half, maybe a slightly more, that deal with students. All the rest of these are all the other types of records that your agency could create. What is involved in here is it will tell you it'll give you a definition of the record. It'll tell you how long you're supposed to keep it for and how you're supposed to dispose of it. There are very few records that we keep longer than a handful of years. If you were to click on this is a quick glance infographic that will show you what are the most common records that are used and how long to keep them. So what I advise is print this one out, give it to all the front desk folks or anybody that deals with records so that they can have that quick disposition guide as to what to keep. Really, one of the things that folks do not think about, because it's not really measurable as far as I can tell, is when you look at your annual budget or the line items for a budget, record management is not a part of that necessarily. Because it's a little bit here, it's a little bit here, but a huge cost is the space that you're actually using to put all of this stuff. And I'm not sure if any of you are aware, but you do not have to store your records on site. What you can do is you can contact state archives, and they have this program called Scan on Demand, where the only thing that you have to do is purchase these special boxes from OfficeMax. You can load the boxes as you see fit, like organize them in your way. Send them to Clearfield. They have a warehouse in Clearfield. And all you need to do is you can call up and you can be like, I don't know, hey Janet, I need the ones from box 352 that are labeled whatever. And Janet will go and grab them, scan them, send them to you securely, and then you'll have just exactly what you need, so you don't need to store that on site. And then, when those records meet retention, they'll destroy it for you. And normally that means incinerate, pulverize. That's what they say. So, we have this course. I advise anybody in your district or agency that deals with records, even if they're not the records manager, to kind of go over this. It talks about all of these different aspects, how to classify, appraise, stuff with grandma, what to do if you get a grandma request. Did you know if anybody in here if you've gotten grandma requests?
Oh yes.
Okay, that's fun. Fun times. This is the inside of the record retention document. I don't know why these things never, it's gotta be like the projector, but. So student record, attendance rolls, so 5.1 is attendance rolls. You can see over here that you retain it for 1 year and then you destroy them. And if you want to click on this hyperlink, that'll take you to GRS 1016, which will describe to you exactly what that could be. Student visa case files, 4 years. Early graduation certificates, 1 year. Homeless student report, 2 years. So a lot of these things we're not keeping for very long anyway. One thing that I would advise for you to maybe convey to your record officer if you are not, is to, at the end of the school year, do something that we call like a Wipeout Wednesday or something like that, where you go in and you just every year just get rid of the stuff that you don't need, or you send it to archives. Here again is this disposition. So these are all the things that would be permanent and would go to archives. These are all the things, it's got how many years you would keep them. So more than 7 years, 1 to 6 years, 1 year or less, and non-records. We also have, for 3 years, let me see right here. How many of you know, you can't really see this, but for 3 years, what a dead file is? Kind of. It doesn't necessarily need to be specifically special. So a student leaves your school and nobody requests the file. So the file stays there. You hold on to it for 3 years and then you get rid of it. So that's a dead file. What we would like to set up, and I've talked to archives about this, I don't know how difficult it would be, but setting up something where we call them like frozen files, to where we send them to kind of like a holding space. And if you've got a student that came to your agency, but you never got the folder from where they were, that you can go and check that frozen file area to see. But a lot of times too, there's like all sorts of naming conventions with like, you know, Hispanic students have the double last name, and so it's like, how did they put that in the SIS correctly? I'll talk about that in just a second. Because this is Linda, my good friend Linda. This is a work in progress. We're building this. This is a thing that I'm super proud of. I keep getting taken off. I like have a little focus on the project and then I don't. But, excuse me, kids brought home something from school. Front Desk 411. None, and correct me if I'm wrong, but do any of your front desk folks receive training? My kid goes to Granite, one of the largest school districts in the state, and I went and talked to the front desk folks as I was like seeding this project, and I was like, so what happens? And they're like, we get hired and we get maybe a mentor secretary that's there for a year that we can call if we need, but a lot of this is just trial and error, trial by fire, and then when they leave, all that institutional knowledge leaves with them. So, what we're trying to do is create a landing spot, and this isn't necessarily a course, it's just hosted on Canvas because it's easy for us to change and maintain and update and add things to. But it's more of a bookmark this reference point, because the different things that we talk about are cumulative folder, birth certificates, SSIDs, how to work with community partners like after school programs, how to deal with law enforcement and SROs. I mean, that was a question when I was talking about incidents. We had a school call us a couple of weeks ago and they were like, the police want to come in and look at a record of a student that's no longer coming to this school. Can they look at this record? And we were like, do they have parental consent? And they're like, we'll ask them to go get parental consent. We never heard that from. Well, it ended up happening. One of the things that we think, and I'd like to kind of insta poll, but how many of you feel like this section is of value to you? How many of you have students who fit that mold? That they are a refugee, immigrant, or a new American? And all the different nuances that may come with them. They're not going to have a birth certificate. They're going to have different forms. And so it's imperative for the front desk folks to kind of understand some of those things. Custodial issues, we've got some stuff on there, all the different annual trainings that are required. Model documents. If you have a great model document that you'd like to share, like a parent permission form or custody, I don't know, there's all sorts of things out there that I know that Academica West is really good at helping us and support us with this project. So, she says, I got training and support I've needed for years. It's so nice to have this bookmark so I can stay up to date. Well, one thing that we really want to get into, and I don't know if, and this is kind of that reciprocal conversation, do you feel like there is a need for us or somebody like us to provide training or resources for parents. Like, I'm a parent, and if this was not my job, I would have no idea what my rights are as far as my children's education records are, or what FERPA is, or what I can have removed or amended, or who can look at the stuff, or what happens if my child's stuff is breached. So this is something that we're kind of floating out there. Maybe we want to do, as we just talked about social media, a social media campaign about like, hey parents, what does FERPA mean? More resources for you, all the things that we have on YouTube. We have the front desk stuff, we have FERPA stuff, can't read that, teacher training course, our webinars, so we put stuff online, yeah.
So with the parents,
Mm-hmm.
we've had a couple of opportunities this year with some very determined parents who are concerned about privacy, and they come with a request, but they don't have the vocabulary.
Right.
So they're asking for everything under the sun, and the expectation is we can provide everything under the sun. So when we, have a conversation, say this is what school official means, and what records we have, and what the other we can't give you because
Right.
we don't own them,
Right.
they just don't accept it. And so I would say your question on something for them to understand what their rights are and what the scope of their rights are seems appropriate. It would have been helpful to say, here, let's look at this resource from the state. Here's what we can give you.
Right.
Or this is what school official means.
Okay.
And it's not just over the phone trying to explain. So, that's
No,
what
no,
she
no,
said.
I think that's great. I mean, maybe if we had a little YouTube playlist or something like that is more parent focused and less, yeah, something. I mean, I think that there's all sorts of, I mean, that's kind of where we're at, is we think that this is the audience in our ecosphere that is the most underserved, I think, but they're the ones that have the most power, which is kind of a weird. All of our YouTube stuff, which I said, this is new. I developed it over the summer. How many of you have seen my little Ask Before You App video? Nicole, yeah. How many of you have found the value in it? Is there value? Yes. It's only a minute and a half long. It's born out of truth that a teacher goes to a conference and is told to use all sorts of cool new tools, and then they come back so. True story, I was at the Rural Schools Conference over the summer, and I attended a session held by another state agency that we love, UETN. And they were promoting all sorts of apps that teachers should be using. And this is a point of conversation between our section and UETN that we need to get a handle on. But all of the apps, I'm sitting there in this session, and I'm looking them up to see if they have data privacy agreements. And none of them do. And so there comes that conflict where a teacher is endorsed essentially by a state agency that says, go ahead and use this thing, but then they're not really allowed to, and so how do you keep a cap on all of that stuff? So these things are designed for you to distribute to your faculty. If you are not using SDPC, there is also Learn Platform. How many of you are familiar with Learn Platform? Yes. Are you a fan of Learn Platform? Those of you that use it, yeah?
I like both of them for different reasons.
Both of them for different reasons. Fantastic. They should be used for different kinds of things. SDPC is really good at contracts and piggybacking onto contracts. How many of you have no idea what this is, but you deal with data privacy agreements? Good. Don't be afraid to raise your hand where it's a safe space. Katie and I have created this, which I hope is a useful tool, and it should be clickable on your presentation. But what this is we call it the Utah Student Privacy Alliance, because we're nothing but acronyms, right? Applications menu. So everything, there's 930 different products on this menu. Essentially, if a product is on this menu and a teacher requests it in the morning, you could depending upon your workload and bandwidth and how much you care, you could give them access to it almost immediately or by the end of the day. And it's just a matter of how you would list it in your registry, whether it's Learn or SDPC. But essentially what this is does this product have a state contract? So these ones have a state contract. You can use it. These are two different privacy pledges, two different badging systems, essentially. And if they have a badge, you can't see any in this screenshot that have an IQSAFE badge, but there are probably 50 to 100. Then you can use them. And you would add them to SDPC as other types of agreements. You can add these. If you haven't heard of the Auto Exhibit E function, it's amazing. It allows you to say, Paul Lewis and Alpine has subscribed to SuperLearn, which is my made-up company. And any of you that want to jump on, all you have to do is click that Exhibit E thing. It's probably like 4 clicks and you're on it as well. So this is that menu, 930 things that are available to use. If you have any questions about that, I can definitely walk you through that. And I keep it updated. So this was the last time that it was updated on Halloween. No tricks, no treats, just applications. One of the things that I really like, and this isn't necessarily anything, I just like it as a part of your process. They don't look into the audit clause of our law, so this isn't like a straight, like, if it's okay in here, then it's okay. But Common Sense Media, which is one of my favorite watchdog organizations, they've gone through and they've vetted hundreds and hundreds of privacy policies. And so those of you that know me or talked to me about some of the SDPC stuff, there is a vendor that we talk about quite a bit called Epic Books for Kids. Teachers love it. But they won't sign a data privacy agreement. And my feeling is that if you looked up Epic Books for Kids on this, Common Sense Media rates their privacy policy as a D. So, those of you that know, if they were to sign our data privacy agreement, it would supersede theirs, which means that they would have to meet the threshold of ours, and they're choosing not to. So, Epic Books, I mean, that may not be, that's my philosophy, it's my take on it, but I feel like this is a good point of, hey teacher, what does Common Sense think about it? Does it make your stomach churn a little bit because they got a D on that? We have all sorts of other courses on Canvas. That's what we use to disseminate stuff. We have that Appointed Records Officer course. I use Beyond. That's where all my cartoons. So essentially what this is, if you have to create content or learning for anybody or any sort of like training stuff, this is what I use primarily. It used to be called Go Animate. It has like a 2-week free thing, but essentially what it does is it makes, I call them PowerPoints with soul. They're a little bit more engaging. And as you've noticed, what we've done is we create different avatars to represent certain aspects of what we're doing. And I think that especially when Avalon was a real person in her real position and she was a cartoon, people were like, oh, Avalon, I know you. I've seen your animated version. So it's helpful for that retention piece. And then in the future, this was something that we had talked about, but we wanted to talk to LEAs about collecting social security numbers. If you want to take a look at any of your registration documentation or anything, please don't collect social security numbers. That's against the law. But there's all sorts of other things that we are looking at doing. I think that a lot of what's on your sticky notes will help inform us going forward as well. I don't know how much time I took, but that's all my time. And I think I ended when I was supposed to. So, do you guys have any questions? Do you have access to these things? What kinds of things do you need from us? What kinds of things have we given you that are useful, that you enjoy? If you want to watch a cartoon, I can throw one up real quick.
I've got a question with some of your training materials.
Yeah.
Like some of the links that are in the slides. Do you anticipate any of those changing very much? Like
So the YouTube stuff is just going to be updated as it goes.
Okay.
I mean, that's something that we are definitely cognizant of when we create these things, is that you don't want to create like a 6-minute long thing and then have the legislation change like one little piece, and you've got to change the whole thing. So we try to keep it as generalized as possible too. But one of our goals actually for November and December, because our expectations over the last couple of months have been a lot, we're going into a bunker, so to speak, and we're going to go through all of our model documents and everything that we've got and make sure that it is up to date and current. But for the most part, everything should be good to go. Yeah.
You said you're gonna be sending out this so that we can have access to all that.
Yeah, and if you want to just put in that link right there, you should have access and just bookmark
And
it.
if we're not getting emails from you guys, then let's
So
do
if you're
it.
not, and I would, yeah, that's a good, so I go to USPE's website. I find our section, which is the student data privacy section. I don't know if you guys can even see that. But right here is a link to our YouTube stuff. This is to contact us. That's our privacy@schools.utah.gov. This is a link to get onto our newsletter. We send it out once a month. And then over here are all the different things. So I'm actually glad. So data managers, if you were to click on this link, it will give you all sorts of resources. So it'll provide you a link to the course. It'll provide you a link to model documents that you can put on your websites, all sorts of different things. So we're going to be cleaning this up over the next couple of weeks as well. We've got resources for parents, teachers. This is not probably up to date. So to answer your question, this is not up to date, but the actual content is up to date. This is all of our record management stuff right here. This is all of our data privacy agreement stuff right here. Yes, Nicole.
Because you mentioned like the educator course, teachers have to do that every 5 years. That's it. And what
For
about
relicensure.
everybody else in the school? Like, do they need to
Yeah.
take that course, or?
Let me just add that, I get pushback every year because of this relicensure piece that has to be completed. But we also require at our schools that they do our training. And even though it's a duplicate, they do it every year. And, yeah, so and it's everybody.
We've been making everyone do the educator course every year, cause I was like, I don't know what else.
It's not gonna hurt them.
No, it's not gonna hurt them, but I've just been getting a lot of pushback and, you know, and I'm like, I think that was just.
Well, and the educator course, you updated it a month ago?
Yeah, a little bit. Do you want me to speak to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've heard similar, when you watch the same videos every year, it can get kinda tiresome, is what we're hearing from folks, so, some people do have, their folks do the relicensure course in entirety every year. What's required is that folks who have, access to education records, they need to receive privacy training. The law doesn't really say it doesn't say how often. I think annually at a minimum is good, but it doesn't have to be the full course necessarily. So some schools or districts are taking like a couple of videos each year, and they might ask some questions or something, and then the next year they might do 2 different videos, something like that. We also want to start providing more little pieces of training that you could like plug into your own, like a Google form, for example. Like we've been working on a bunch of scenarios, privacy scenarios that people could look at, try to decide how they would answer that. Those are really quick little short training pieces that you could plug into your annual training if you want. Does that help at all?
Yeah, I think what some folks have done is they've just gone in and clubbed some of our stuff and crafted their own little playlists to kind of put out there depending upon what issues they're seeing. And I don't think, things change so much from year to year. I think that even you taking current events from the news, like the teacher from down south who put the stuff on TikTok last year, like keeping abreast of those kind of things so that you can incorporate those into, well, this happened last year at another school and this was the fallout from it. what kinds of things can we as a team learn from this so that we're not, I guess beyond a data breach, the worst thing to happen is to be negatively portrayed in the news. And that's kind of the consequence of some of this stuff. But I think that you guys have the ability to get up and move around, and we're gonna play some games in a little bit. Yeah?
Some game. Yeah, not really, but.
Not really. But this is our agenda for the rest of the afternoon. We're gonna do some ed camp, and then the higher ed folks are gonna be with the PTACs. So